And tonight, the vault is open.
Two men were found dead on a hill in Brazil. They were lying on their backs, side by side. Their bodies were composed. Their hands were at their sides. Their eyes were closed. They were wearing suits, formal suits, pressed, clean, as if they had dressed for an important occasion. On their faces, lead masks, not safety masks, not industrial equipment, handmade lead masks, cut precisely to cover the eyes and the upper face. No lenses, no openings, just solid lead, pressed against their skin. Next to the bodies was a single piece of paper, torn from a notebook. It contained 7 sentences written in Portuguese. The first sentence read at 6:30 a.m. And we will ingest the capsules. The last sentence read, wait for the signal. There was no signal. There was no capsule container found near the bodies. There were no witnesses. There was no explanation for the masks. The 2 men were identified within 24 hours. They were not strangers. They were not criminals. They were not mentally ill. They were electronics technicians, respected professionals, with families, with jobs, with normal lives that ended on a hill with lead over their eyes. I covered this case for the first time in 2009. I found the original police file through a contact in Rio de Janeiro who had access to the Niterói department archives. I have reviewed it 4 times since then. I've never been able to close it. This is the story of Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana. What they did on August 20th, 1966, what was found with them, and what the note they left behind means if you understand the context the official investigation refused to consider. Chapter 1: The Hill of Vintem. Niterói is a city across the bay from Rio de Janeiro. In 1966 it was a working city, industrial, dense, the kind of place where electronics technicians were respected and moderately well paid. Practical men, technical men, men who understood how things worked. Manuel Pereira da Cruz was 32nd. He had a wife. He had children. He was known in his community as reliable, calm, serious about his work. Miguel Jose Viana was 29th, also married, also with children. His employer described him as one of the most competent technicians in the shop. Precise, methodical, not given to unusual behavior. On August 17th, 1966, 3 days before they were found, both men told their families they had business to attend to. They didn't say what business. They said they would be back soon. They traveled together to Niterói. Witnesses saw them at a bar in the city on the afternoon of August 17th. They were observed purchasing raincoats. They were observed purchasing a bottle of water. The raincoats were found with their bodies, unused, folded beside them. The water bottle was also found. It was empty. After purchasing those items, they were not seen again until a young man walking on the hill of Vintem on August 20th noticed something wrong among the brush and trees near the summit. The hill of Vintem is not a dramatic location. It is not a famous place. It is a modest elevation above the city. Locals used it occasionally for walks. It offered a view of the surrounding area. It offered nothing else that anyone had ever documented. The young man who found the bodies ran down the hill and reported what he had seen to the local police. 2 officers responded within 30 minutes. What they found was documented in the initial report. I have read that report. The bodies were in a state consistent with death occurring to 2-3 days prior, which placed time of death at approximately August 17th or 18th. Within hours of the last witness sightings in the city below, they'd walked up the hill. Almost immediately after purchasing the raincoats and water, they had never left. The lead masks were the detail that stopped the initial responding officers entirely. Neither of them had ever seen anything like it. The masks were not purchased items. They were fabricated, carefully, from lead sheeting that had been cut and shaped by hand. The edges were smooth, finished, the work of someone who knew how to work with materials, which was consistent with both men's professional backgrounds. Electronics technicians, men who worked with their hands, men who could fabricate something precise if they needed to. They had made those masks themselves, deliberately, in advance. The note was found between the 2 bodies, protected from the elements by the way it had been folded. The paper was from a standard notebook. The handwriting was calm. No signs of agitation. No pressure variations in the pen strokes. The note was written by someone who was completely composed when they wrote it. I want to give you the full note, translated as precisely as possible from the Portuguese original. Be at the specified location at 6:30 p.m. at 6:30 I mean just the capsules. After the effect is produced, protect the metals. Wait for the signal to use the glasses. That is the complete text. 7 instructions, written in sequence, as if following a protocol. The investigators identified for immediate problems with the note. First, no capsules were found near the bodies. The toxicology report found no identifiable substance in either man's system that would account for death. The cause of death was listed officially as cardiac arrest. Both men, simultaneously, of cardiac arrest, with no identified cause. Second, no metals were found near the bodies beyond the lead masks themselves. The instruction to protect the metals refers to something that either was removed before the bodies were discovered or was never physically present. Third, the glasses referenced in the final instruction were the lead masks. Investigators concluded this based on context, but lead masks with no openings do not function as glasses in any conventional sense. They block vision entirely. They do not filter light. They do not protect the eyes from anything that glass or plastic couldn't manage more effectively. You make lead masks for one reason: to block something that lead blocks. Lead blocks radiation. Fourth, the signal. No signal was documented. No signal was explained. No signal was defined anywhere in the note or in any item found with the bodies. They were waiting for something that either never came or that nobody else could perceive. The police investigation lasted several weeks. It produced no suspect because there was no crime in the conventional sense. No evidence of violence. No evidence of coercion. 2 men had walked up a hill and died there. The file was eventually classified as unexplained death. It remains open. What the file does not contain is any serious investigation into what the 2 men had been involved in the weeks before their deaths. I found that investigation elsewhere. Chapter 2: What they were doing before the hill. Manolo and Miguel were not acting alone. This is the detail that changes everything about how this case is understood. They were members of a group, not a criminal group, not a cult in the conventional sense, a study group, a circle of men in the Niterói area who met regularly to discuss what they called the contact. I found this through 3 separate sources. A journalist named Ibrahim Soud, who investigated the case in the 1970s and published his findings in a Brazilian periodical. A researcher at the University of Campinas who has studied the case academically, and a family member of one of the other group members who agreed to speak to me on condition of anonymity. The group had between 8 and 12 members. The number varied across accounts. All of them were working professionals, engineers, technicians, tradespeople, practical men with technical educations. They were not the kind of people you associate with fringe belief systems. They were the kind of people who build things, who fix things, who understand circuits and systems, and they believed they had made contact with something. Not metaphorically, not spiritually in a vague sense. Literally, they believed they had established a communicative contact with an intelligence that was not human. They had been working on this for years before August 1966. The researcher at Campinas described their methodology as rigorous by their own standards. They kept records. They documented their sessions. They developed protocols. They iterated. The capsules referenced in the note were part of a protocol they had been developing and refining. The family member I spoke to said the group believed the capsules would alter perception in a specific way, allowing contact to be maintained during a critical window. I asked what the capsules contained. The family member said nobody outside the group knew exactly. The men who made them were the technicians, Manuel and Miguel, the 2 men on the hill. The lead masks were also part of the protocol. The group believed that during the contact window, certain forms of radiation would be present. The lead was protection, practical, engineered. The way these men approached everything, the signal they were waiting for, was the initiation of contact. They had gone to the hill because the hill had been chosen in advance. I asked the researcher why that specific location. He said the group had a method for selecting locations. I was never able to fully reconstruct it, but the hill of Vintem appears in their records as a designated contact point, chosen months before August 1966. Months before. They had planned this specific location for months. They had prepared the masks. They had prepared the capsules. They had written the protocol note. And then two of them had gone up the hill on August 17th, dressed in suits, carrying raincoats they never used, and waited. The family member told me something that is not in any published account of this case. She said that other members of the group were supposed to be on that hill, not Manuel and Miguel alone. The protocol called for a larger group, for 5 members at minimum. The others didn't come. I asked why. She said something changed at the last minute. I don't know what. My relative came home that evening and didn't speak for 3 days. When he finally talked about it, he said only that Manuel and Miguel had insisted on going anyway, that they believed the window would not come again. The window would not come again. So 2 men in suits climbed the hill alone, with their lead masks and their capsules and their folded note, and waited for a signal. The rest of the group stayed behind. The rest of the group survived. I spent a long time thinking about that fact. The men who went up the hill died. The men who stayed behind left. And none of the survivors ever spoke publicly about what the group was doing, about what they believed they had contacted, about what Manuel and Miguel thought was worth dying on a hill in suits to reach. One of the surviving members was interviewed by Ibrahim Sood in the early 1970s. The interview was brief. The member declined to discuss the group's activities in detail. He said only one thing that Sood considered significant enough to include in his published account. Sood asked him directly, did something happen on that hill? The man said, something always happens when you reach the window. The question is whether you're prepared for what reaches back. I've read that sentence more times than I can count. Whether you're prepared for what reaches back. Manuel and Miguel believed they were prepared. They had the masks. They had the capsules. They had the note with the protocol. They died of simultaneous cardiac arrest, with no identified cause, with no substances in their systems, with no evidence of violence. To healthy men in their 30s, hearts stopped, at the same time, on a hill where they were waiting for something to reach back. The toxicology panel used in 1966 was limited by the technology of the era. It tested for common poisons and substances. It was not equipped to identify compounds outside its programmed parameters. I asked a forensic toxicologist what a modern panel might find that a 1966 panel would miss. She said a significant number of things. Synthetic compounds, certain biological agents, anything developed after the panel's reference library was built. I asked, is it possible that whatever was in those capsules wouldn't have shown up in a 1966 toxicology stream? She said entirely possible, if the compounds were unusual enough, or new enough, or synthesized rather than naturally occurring. 2 electronics technicians, men who understood chemistry well enough to work with sensitive components, men who had been developing a protocol for years, men who could have synthesized something that a 1966 laboratory wouldn't recognize, and who took whatever they synthesized up a hill and ingested it while wearing lead shields over their eyes, waiting for the signal, waiting for what reaches back. The bottle of water was empty when it was found. The raincoats were folded. The note was between them. And the capsule container was gone. Either it dissolved, or it was removed, or it was never a physical object in the sense investigators were looking for. I don't know which. What I know is that the hill of Vintem has not been the same since August 1966. Locals avoid it after dark. Not because of any official prohibition. Because of something more basic than that. Because of what people say they feel up there. A presence. Not hostile. Not welcoming. Just present. Like something is still waiting. Like the window didn't close the way Manuel and Miguel expected it to. Like whatever they reached toward is still there. Still waiting for the rest of the group to arrive. Chapter 3, what the record actually shows. I want to be precise about what is confirmed and what is inference. The confirmed Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana were real people. Their deaths on August 20th, 1966 are documented. The lead masks are documented. The note is documented. The toxicology results are documented. The cause of death listed as cardiac arrest with no identified cause is documented. The police file exists. The initial responding officer's report exists. Ibrahim Sood's published investigation exists. The University of Campinas research exists. These are not rumor. These are not internet mythology. These are sorts and verifiable. What is less confirmed but corroborated across multiple independent sources the existence of the group. The contact protocol. The capsules as a prepared element. The other members who did not go to the hill. What is inference? Everything about what the group believed they were contacting. Everything about what happened on the hill after the last witness saw them in the city below. I want to stay inside the confirmed material for this section, because the confirmed material is strange enough without anything added to it. The note. I've spent more time on those 7 sentences than on almost any other document in 12 years of investigative work. Not because they're long, because every word is load-bearing. Be at the specified location at 6:30 a.m. Here. Not described, not named, specified. This is not the first instruction in a process being invented on the day. This is a reference to something already established. A location that had already been designated and communicated before the note was written. At 6:30 p. Ending just the capsules. The repetition of the time is not accident. It is emphasis. The 6:30 m. window mattered. Specifically, not approximately. The precision suggests the window was time-dependent in a way that minutes could affect. After the effect is produced, protect the metals. The effect, not an effect. A specific, anticipated, previously defined effect. They knew what was coming. They had experienced or studied it enough to name it as a known quantity. The metals. Again, not some metals of the leg. The metals. A specific set of objects already understood by whoever the note was written for. Wait for the signal to use the glasses. Use. Not wear. Not put on. Use the lead masks were functional. They were tools for a specific moment. Not protective equipment worn throughout. Equipment deployed at a precise point in a sequence. And then nothing after that. The note 10 set the signal. Whatever came after the signal was not written down. Either because it couldn't be described in advance, or because whoever the note was written for already knew what came next, or because what came next was not something that could be written. The researcher at campus made an observation I've returned too many times. He said the note is not a record of what happened. It is operational instructions. It was written to be followed, not to be understood by anyone outside the group. It was never meant for investigators. It was never meant for the public. It was written for Manol, or for Miguel, or for the group members who didn't come. A reminder, a protocol checklist, written by someone who assumed the reader already had all the context, and then that note ended up in a police evidence bag, read by people who had none of the context at all. That's why it made no sense. It wasn't written to make sense to us. I want to tell you about something the official investigation overlooked entirely. The suits. This detail appears in the initial police report and is not mentioned again in any subsequent official documentation. But it's the detail that has bothered me the longest. To electronics technicians, traveling to attend to unspecified business, purchasing raincoats and water, climbing a hill, in suits, formal suits, pressed and clean as if they had dressed for something important. I put this to a behavioral analyst who has worked on unexplained death cases for the FBI for 11 years. I'm not going to name her. She asked me not to. I described the scene without telling her the case. I asked what the suits suggested behaviorally. She said formality in death preparation is documented across many cultural contexts. People dress deliberately when they believe they are going somewhere significant. The suit is not random. It is intentional communication. I asked communication to whom? She said to whatever they expected to encounter. You dress for your audience. These men were dressing for something they considered important enough to wear their best for. I asked what kind of encounter would produce their response into practical technical men. She said one they considered a first meeting, or a formal occasion, or both. A first meeting. They had been studying and preparing for years. They had developed a protocol. They had selected a location months in advance. They had prepared the capsules. They had fabricated the masks. And on the day they finally went to the hill, they wore suits, because they expected to meet something, and they wanted to make the right impression. I thought about what that says about the state of mind of those two men. Not delusional, not confused, not frightened, prepared, formal, ready. The behavioral analyst said one more thing before we ended our conversation. She said the composed positioning of the bodies is significant. They were found on their backs, side by side, hands at their sides. eyes closed. This is not how people fall when they die unexpectedly. This is not how cardiac arrest presents in a field setting. I asked what she meant. She said when cardiac arrest takes someone by surprise, they fall, they collapse, they end up in whatever position the body lands in. What you're describing is placement. Deliberate, careful, final positioning. I asked, placed by whom? She said that's the question. Either they position themselves, which requires a level of deliberate calm in final moments that is extremely rare, or someone was there after they die, and arranged them. The hill of Vintem had no witnesses. No one saw them go up. No one saw anyone come down. The young man who found them 3 days later saw nothing else. If someone arranged those bodies, they left no trace. No footprints in the documentation. No disturbance of the surrounding vegetation beyond what two men arriving would produce. Either two men lay down carefully and died with their eyes closed and their hands at their sides, or someone was on the hill who has never been identified. The final piece of the confirmed record I want to give you involves a detail that emerged not from the police file, but from a separate source. In 1967, approximately 1 year after the deaths, the state of Rio de Janeiro conducted a review of unexplained deaths in the greater metropolitan area, a standard administrative process. The review produced a summary document. The Silver Falls, the Vintem case, appears in that summary. One paragraph. The paragraph ends with a classification. The classification is not unexplained death. It is not cardiac arrest. The classification used is a Portuguese administrative term that translates roughly as death during contact with unknown phenomena. I found that classification through the campus researcher. He had a copy of the summary document. I asked him how that classification existed in a government document if the official cause of death was cardiac arrest. He said because two separate administrative systems processed the case. The medical examiner listed cardiac arrest. The Metropolitan Review Office used a different classification framework. Nobody reconciled the two. I asked, so somewhere in the official record of the state of Rio de Janeiro, this case is classified as death during contact with unknown phenomenon. He said it has been since 1967. It has never been changed. Death during contact with unknown phenomenon. Not mass hysteria. Not unexplained. Not unresolved. Contact. Someone in a government office in 1967 read the file and wrote that word. And then nobody changed it for nearly 60 years. Chapter for the thing I keep returning to. I've covered this case for times over 15 years. Every time I come back to it I find something I missed before. The classification document. The behavioral analysis of the suits. The family members' account of the group members who didn't come. And every time I come back, I end up at the same place. The signal. Wait for the signal. That is the last instruction in the note. The last thing they were supposed to do before using the lead masks. They went to the hill. They arrived at 6:30. They ingested whatever was in the capsules. The effect was produced. They protected whatever the metals were. And then they waited. And either the signal came and what reached back was something their bodies couldn't survive, or the signal never came and they died waiting for it. The cardiac arrest tells me nothing about which of those two things happened. To healthy men in their 30s dying of cardiac arrest simultaneously with no identified cause is consistent with both scenarios. Something that stopped their hearts, or nothing, and hearts that simply stopped. I put that question to a cardiologist who has reviewed unusual cardiac death cases for 20 years. I described the scenario without the context. Two men, same age group, simultaneous cardiac arrest. No identified cause. No prior cardiac history documented. He said simultaneous spontaneous cardiac arrest into otherwise healthy individuals with no shared environmental cause is extraordinarily rare. The probability without a shared cause is effectively zero. I asked what shared causes could produce that outcome. He said extreme electrical stimulus, certain chemical compounds, severe acute stress response producing catacolation and surge, extreme fear. I stopped on the last one. Extreme fear. I asked him to explain the mechanism. He said a sufficiently powerful fear response floods the body with adrenaline and related compounds. In extreme cases this can trigger ventricular fibrillation. The heart essentially short circuits. It's documented. It's rare. But it happens. I asked could it happen simultaneously into people. He said if both people experience the same extreme stimulus at the same moment. Yes. I asked what kind of stimulus produces that level of response into prepared, calm, technically minded individuals. He said something they weren't prepared for, no matter how much they thought they were. Something they weren't prepared for. They had spent years preparing. They had the masks. They had the capsules. They had the suits. They had the protocol note. They had selected the location months in advance. And whatever they encountered on that hill was something they weren't prepared for. The researcher at Campanus said something in our last conversation that I want to give you exactly as he said it. He said the mistake people make with this case is focusing on whether the contact was real. That's the wrong question. The right question is what Manolo and Miguel believed they were going to meet, because whatever it was, they were willing to die for the chance to meet it. And in the end, that's exactly what happened. Willing to die for the chance. To men with wives and children and jobs and normal lives, who climbed the hill in suits with lead over their eyes. Not because they were crazy, not because they were deceived, because they believed with the certainty of engineers and technicians and practical men who had spent years testing and refining and nitrating, that what was on the other side of that window was worth everything they were risking to reach it. I've sat with that for 15 years. I still don't know if they were right. What I know is that they went up that hill believing they were. And something on that hill agreed to meet them. And whatever the meeting produced, it stopped both their hearts. At the same moment, in the same place, while they waited for a signal that either came or didn't. And the note they left behind. The note written for an audience that already had the context. Ended up in a police evidence bag instead. Read by people who had none of it. Including me. I've read it dozens of times. I've had it translated by 3 separate translators. I've analyzed it with a behavioral specialist and a forensic linguist and a researcher who has spent 20 years on this case. And the last sentence still lands the same way every time. Wait for the signal. Present tense. Not they waited. Not they would wait. Wait. As if the instruction is still active. As if the window is still open. As if whatever they were trying to reach is still on the other side. Still sending the signal. Still waiting for someone to use the glasses. Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana are buried in Niterói. Their families have never spoken publicly about what happened. Their children grew up without fathers. Without explanations. The police file remains open. Classified as unexplained death. The 1967 Metropolitan Review classification has never been changed. The hill of Vintem is still there. Above the city. Accessible. No official prohibition on visiting it. Locals don't go up there at night. Not because anyone told them not to. Because of something more instinctive than that. Ibrahim Sood published his investigation in the 1970s. He spent years trying to find the surviving group members. Most of them refused to speak. The one who spoke said only one thing that Sood had considered significant. Whether you're prepared for what reaches back. The group disbanded after August 1966. The researcher at Campanus believes some members continued their work privately, in smaller numbers, in different locations. He doesn't know what they found. I asked him at the end of our last conversation what he believed happened on that hill. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I believe 2 men went somewhere that most people never go. I believe they got there. And I believe what they found there was real. And I believe it was more than their bodies could survive. I asked, do you think it was worth it to them? He said, I think in the last moment, before whatever happened, they thought it was. I think they saw something. And I think the last thing they felt was not fear. I asked what he thought they felt. He said confirmation. I've thought about that for a long time. 2 men in suits on a hill in Brazil. Lead over their eyes. Waiting for a signal. Waiting for what reaches back. And in the final moment, confirmation. That everything they had spent years building toward was real. That the window was real. That the contact was real. That whatever was on the other side was actually there. If you've heard of this case before, I hope you understand it differently now. Not as a curiosity. Not as a footnote in unexplained death lists. As 2 men who believed in something completely, and went to find out if they were right. Share this case if it means something to you. It's been sitting in a police file in Niterói for nearly 60 years. Classified as unexplained. It deserves more than that. Subscribe to William's Vault. New cases every week. I'll see you in the next one.
Tonight's file is closed, but the secrets below never sleep. Subscribe to hold the key to your return. And now, the vault is closed.